Good afternoon, everybody. Huh? Oh, thank you. My name is Teresa Carroll, and I'd like to thank you all for coming for today's last session. I appreciate you all actually taking time to come into the session that I'm teaching. My name, as I said, is Teresa Carroll. I am an Assistant Audit Director for HUD OIG's Disaster Recovery Audit Division. We actually have a division that its sole purpose is to look at CDBG-DR. And I actually noticed that being part of a HUD OIG audit was on your bingo page. What I'm going to cover today, I've got a lot to cover. I have only an hour to do it. So it's going to be the 35,000-foot flyby. Buried in this presentation, take it home. If you pull up the PowerPoint version, I have embedded links for you. So you can find the information that I'm talking about, read it on your own, and hopefully get some more information than I have time to give you today, because this could actually be a multi-day course. With that said, really fast, what am I going to cover? Well, I'm going to give you a very brief introduction to who HUD OIG is. I'm going to spend a lot of time, though, talking about how do we design our processes with fraud awareness in mind, and that's for you all. How do you all create those strong internal controls? You know, what are the requirements, as well as what are the best practices that are good things for you to get and follow? We're going to talk about what everybody loves to hear. What fraud schemes am I aware of? Because I've got 30 plus years with HUD OIG. I've started looking at disaster with Katrina. I have stories. Probably won't get to a lot of them. And then finally, I'm going to wrap it up of what is we HUD OIG found in the years that we have looked at disaster, and how can that be used by you to actually look at fraud and design your programs and internal controls to prevent the problems that we've seen in the past. And before I get going, I'm going to kind of pick on you all. Can I see a show of hands? How many has been here a year or less in your position? Got 1, 2, 3. Actually got more than I expected. 1 to 5 years. That's kind of what I was expecting. More than 5 years. Okay, decent break. So I'm going to warn you. I have worked for the government for 30 plus years. My father was military. I tend to spew acronyms like you would not believe. If I throw out one, you don't know what it is, don't be afraid to say, oh, what was that? We don't understand Greek. All right, I got to start with a disclaimer though. I am required to tell you that everything in this presentation has been approved, but all the words coming out of the mouth of me are my own opinion, and they don't necessarily represent HUD, HUD OIG, or the United States. Also, if I talk about audit processes, that is only our audit processes in existence at this time, and they could change or you could experience something different. Disclaimer aside, let's talk about who is HUD OIG. Okay, this is Ray Davis. She is our IG. She has been sworn in as our IG since 1999. And our IG at HUD was one of the original 12 original IGs created when the IG Act was passed in the 70s. So we're one of the oldies. We are independent. We have our own budget within HUD. We have an independent plan, strategic goals. And we purport not only to HUD, our reports get shipped to Congress and they are made available to the public on our web pages. So that's who we are and what we do. If you want to know more, there's the link on the bottom. Okay, what is our mission? Well, it's actually pretty darn simple. Safeguard HUD's programs from fraud, waste, and abuse, and identify opportunities for programs to progress and succeed. That's actually pretty short considering all the things we do. I am an auditor. So what do auditors do? Well, we conduct audits, including of HUD, its programs, its grantees, and all the way down to the beneficiaries. And those audits can include a lot of things. We can look at compliance. Did you or did you not meet the rules? But we can also look at other things of, is this program operating effectively? Is it efficient? Is there a better way to do this? Those are also the types of audits that we do. But we do more. I feel like I'm doing a ShamWow commercial. We actually also assist in criminal and civil cases. So that would be support to our Office of Investigations, who are law enforcement officers. And they work directly with the Department of Justice and or local prosecutors to prosecute civil and criminal cases. But we also review legislation. We look at regulations and we look at the rules. I've actually looked at bills before they actually get presented before Congress. We also follow up on those audit reports that we issue. We can even go out and do what's called a corrective action verification to make sure that you told us you were going to do X. Did you actually do it? And we also do what I'm doing here today. We provide outreach and training. All right, I told you it was going to be brief. Before I get off of this, I mentioned our Office of Investigation. Who are they? They are actual law enforcement officers. They are our sister. They actually open their criminal cases based on information from our hotline, other law enforcement agencies, requests from Congress, and their job is to actually go out, investigate, and prosecute crimes, as well as seek civil action and or administrative action. All right. Let's talk about fraud processes and designing your processes with fraud awareness in mind. Before I can get there, I think, don't we all need to kind of understand and know, well, what is fraud? What is waste? What is abuse? Well, fraud is actually obtaining something of through willful misrepresentation. But here's the really interesting thing, and this is out of GAO's Yellow Book because I'm an auditor. I like to go to Yellow Book. It's my book of rules. But this is not only in Yellow Book. You know, GAO actually has a report on fraud, waste, and abuse that has these very same definitions. And what's really interesting, even in GAO's report, is I don't make the determination whether or not something's fraudulent. That is up to legal or the courts. So it's going to be up to a United States attorney, a DA, or the courts. I can say, looks like fraud. I don't actually get to call it fraud. All right, so abuse. I'm kind of stepping down here because abuse, it's behavior that is deficient or improper when compared to a prudent person. And that prudent person concept is actually copied and referenced in the Uniform Administrative Requirements, which all grantees must follow. And I kind of like to use and refer to it as, if it was in the local newspaper, what would people think? To me, that's a prudent person. If somebody picks it up and goes, oh my God, I would say you probably didn't meet the prudent person rule. But does abuse rise to fraud? No, different level, different tier. Now let's get to waste. Waste is a little different. It's you're expending your resources carelessly. In GAO's report, they even call it squandering. And here's a good case in point. If your organization needs a car, which I can see we might need a car, we might need to drive somewhere, go look at something. Do you need a Dodge Super Sport Charger fully loaded with the extra rims? I heard a yes. Who do you work for again? Probably not. Have I seen that? Yes, that's an actual case. Oops. All right. What is fraud and why does it happen? Well, fraud is at the center of the convergence of three things. It is at the convergence of opportunity, incentive or pressure, and rationalization. So what is opportunity? Well, opportunity is one of those things that your organization actually has complete control over. That is your internal controls. That is your policies and procedures. That is your code of ethics. That is your standards. If something's wrong in your culture, your organization, an unsavory person will probably find a way around it and drive that truck through. So when you go from opportunity, then you have to go kind of the next step, and it's called incentive or pressure. And that normally means I either have a financial pressure, I need money, I have unrealistic goals. And that's more, you find that in corruption when you're trying, or financial statement fraud. I'm trying to make shareholder earnings. I'm trying to meet the number of households assisted, so I fudge my numbers. That would be more incentive. It could be bonuses. I need to meet a number to get my bonus. But then you come to the third one, and that is rationalization. And that is where you have somebody that has an organization with an opportunity that they have a pressure, maybe they need money, and now they start rationalizing. I'm only borrowing the money. I have heard that more times than I can count. Everybody's doing it. Ugh, that tells me your culture, your organizational culture is probably really bad to boot. I'm going to lose everything. I have huge medical bills. My kid's college bill is due. Something happens and I need money now. When those three come together, you have fraud. So let's talk a little bit about fraud. And I didn't put it in this presentation. I would encourage you to write it down and look it up. The Association of Certified Fraud Examiners publishes a report every year called Occupational Fraud, a Report to the Nations. And what it does is, across the globe, it writes a report on what fraud has hit, why, what were the causes, and you can take that information and use it to look at your organization when you're looking at your hopefully at least annual fraud risk assessment. The interesting thing is they break fraud into three really big categories: financial statements, asset misappropriation, and corruption. And when I'm talking corruption, I'm talking conflicts of interest, bribery, kickbacks. That's corruption. But one of the most important things I can't begin to stress is you as your organization need to create a tone at the top of we won't tolerate fraud. Won't live here, won't be here, sign organizational statements, publish a policy on rules of behavior, have your employees read and sign it. But not only do you have to have that tone, you have to do what I call walk the walk. Does the boss leave 15 minutes early, or does the boss leave an hour early? Well, if the boss leaves an hour early, the rest of the employees leave half an hour early, and it starts dominoing. So if I can stress anything, is have that culture of ethics, and you will reduce. You're never going to get rid of fraud, but you can reduce it. Beware of possible incentive or pressure indicators. And let me start with the first one, and I'll kind of tell a story and we'll kind of chat for a minute. Living beyond your means. Most people think, that should be obvious. You can tell when somebody's living beyond their means. Well, let me kind of set up the scenario, set up the stage. Small town, what would be called an UGLUG, unit of local government. The employee makes $80,000 a year. Okay. This employee is showing quarter horses, really expensive quarter horses, $1 million quarter horses. Would you be worried at this point? Yeah, nah. $80,000 a year employee buys a ranch, $2 million mobile home. By the time this was all said and done, does anybody want to hazard a guess how much was stolen? $54 million over 20 years. How did this start? Little. It Started with $151,000. And when that didn't get caught, it kept going up over the next 20 years. This poor local government literally couldn't pay for police and firefighting services, couldn't pay for road improvements. How did it work? It was a basic skimmick and check fraud scheme. That's how simple it was. But there was one year, $5.4 million went out the door. There was a bond measure passed. That went out the door. They seized and sold things, never made the money back. I mean, when the U.S. Department of Justice and the Marshal Service are seizing horses, which they've told me in the past, we don't want animals, we kill them. When they're seizing horses and selling them for $775,000, it's a huge fraud. But, you know, people on the ground, if you see something, say something, the number of red flags was huge. It was the giant pink elephant in the middle of the room. How can somebody making $80,000 afford all of this? And once it started unraveling, it was very obvious, and it was found by accident. That person was on leave, touring with the horses, and an employee needed to pull a report. So they went to the bank to get the bank statements, and they found that extra bank account that nobody at the government agency was aware of. Oops. So what I want to kind of stress here is, if you see something, say something. It's probably the best motto I've ever seen come out of a government agency. But seriously, if you see something, say something. ACFE in their annual fraud report says the number one reason that frauds get exposed is tips, tip lines, or tip websites. Have one, use it, look at it. All right, financial difficulties, those are pretty obvious, but they come out in strange ways. You know, it's going to be through conversations with people on the team or the staff. Controlling and unwilling to share duties. Well, that kind of tied right into the first one. Nobody knew the books and records. This person had a bookkeeping role, and they were the only one that was allowed to get into certain things. Red flag number 2. If you're struggling to meet your organizational goals, it could be a potential problem. Close relationships with vendors or contractors or even customers. It's something to kind of stop and look at and say, is this okay? Or is this a sign of something worse? You know, I know of an excellent example that was at a savings and loan. There was a way too close relationship with the loan lenders. They lost $5.5 million because there were kickbacks and gratuities going on. That savings and loan doesn't exist anymore today. All right. Why is fraud awareness and detection necessary? Well, because it's bloody darn important. It can expose not only your entity, it can expose your programs, it can expose you as an individual, depending on where you are in your organization, to financial liabilities. But not only does it expose you, say that you have a CDBG-DR grant, it could expose your subrecipients, it could expose your beneficiaries to maybe having to pay money back. But the most important thing is, and I don't know the range of the room, if your entity is the one signing the grant, the financial liability stops with you as far as HUD is concerned. They're going to come to you for the money. You're going to be on the line for it. But there can also be civil penalties. That is in addition to paying back any fraudulent amount that went out. It is a fine. So start adding. Your losses are getting steeper. There is also the potential for criminal prosecution. But is that all? No, it isn't. Unfortunately, you could lose your grant. Your entity as it is could cease to exist. And I have seen this happen more than once, even at the state level of the grants no longer go to the original entity anymore. And within 3 years, the original entity did not exist. So that's why it's necessary. All right, designing processes and assessing risk. This is a very basic, generic flow process for assessing risk as you're looking at your processes, trying to figure out what your controls are going to be, what your environment is. This is what it looks like. So say you're starting off at the top, I have a new CDBG-DR grant. The first thing I need to do is try and figure out what my potential risks are. Well, how do I do that? This is from the AICPA and the CIMA. That's the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, and I'm not even going to be able to get to the second one today. But this is just for a general business, but you need to do something like this for your organization. You need to say, well, what does my organization consist of? I'm going to have a board, maybe, maybe not. I'm going to have management. I'm going to have employees. We're probably going to need to get supplies. We may not have customers, but we might have beneficiaries. Is there anybody else? We might have subrecipients we need to throw in there. So you throw all that together because that identifies what you're going to be assessing, and then take off your white hat, reach over, pick up that black hat, put it on and say, if I want to steal money, how would I do it? And start listing. And up here, there's a lot. There's everything from corruption to conflicts of interest, to check kiting, to bribery, kickback, your contractors stealing the money and walking off, never to be seen again. Write it all down. Even if it's remote, write it down. You may decide that it's not risky enough that you need to address it, but at least think about it and come up with it. That's the first step in a fraud risk assessment. What can go wrong? I'm not sure, I'm going to go back. So the next step, well, now that we've actually identified, that becomes your risk library. These are the things that we know of that could potentially go wrong. All right, next step on that circle, identify the risk owners. And it actually may be more difficult than you think because, or you could say, well, we could potentially have a problem in procurement. Is that only going to involve a contracting division? No. You may have engineering inspecting stuff. You may have financial, you will have financial probably paying people. If it's supplies, you may have somebody in receiving actually getting goods. So who are all the people that fit into that potential risk activity? Because they're going to become part of identifying your controls. Here's the risk. What are we going to do to make sure that that problem, that fraud, doesn't happen? All right, so now we've gone partway around the circle. Next is you have to evaluate effectiveness. What is that going to be? Quality assurance, monitoring, internal audit, even just managers looking at reports. You know, I read about a 1.4 million salary fraud where the employee didn't show up for years. Did anybody ever ask, where's Bob? But the thing is, and I want to really stress it here, is this is an ongoing process. Don't do it once, stick it in a binder, stick it on the shelf, and let it collect dust. This is something you should do at least annually, if not more often. And here's an example of why. Big box store. All of the cash registers were tied in via lines. Welcome to the wireless age. Oh, wait, this guy over there thought it might be nice that we hook the, let people access our servers so that they can find stuff in the store. Did anybody talk to IT? No. What happened? Somebody out in the parking lot had a private computer and was logging in and stealing credit card information. Did IT find it? No. Anybody want to guess how it was found? Security guy wandering around the parking lot. Why has this car been here for 2 hours? And what's the computer glow coming from the front seat? So when you change something, you need to reassess what has changed, why, and what could it impact? And to take you to more of a CDBG-DR process, I have seen where grant programs evolve. But if your grant programs are evolving, you need to make sure that all of your people are following those new policies and procedures. Because I have gone in and seen where you have 5 people doing it 4 different ways because the policies have changed that much. Don't do that. Test, train, make sure people are actually implementing the changes that came through. All right. I have been asked to kind of give you some grocery shopping lists for procurement. What would be some fraud indicators for procurement? Well, excessive and unjustified change orders is always a concern to me because what does that possibly mean? Low bidding. Somebody lowballed it and came in, they wanted to get that bid, but now they got to make up their costs. So now they're going to start tacking on change orders because they lowballed it to get the contract. Is it always going to be that way? No. But pay attention if you start seeing a lot of them. Go back and pull the scope of contracts. Is what they're changing actually in the original contract? And if it is, why? Lowest bidders selected without proper justification. Is that always a problem? No, it's an indicator that there could be a problem. But most importantly, I want to stress here, document. If you're not picking that low bidder, have a good contract file and document why you're not picking that low bidder. Same thing for sole source. It's a disaster. I get it. I might see sole source early on, but disaster contracts go on for a long time. I mean, the 9/11 grants are still open. So if we're 15 years in, should we still be doing sole source contracts because it's an emergency? Probably not. Please maintain documentation. It is not only good for me, it is really good for you. HUD will probably want it, and if I come in the door, I'm going to want it too. Weak or non-existent policies and procedures. It's a sign that that opportunity is there for something to go wrong. Weak management oversight. Aged contracts. Really, your contract shouldn't go over 5 years before you rebid. If they are, it's an indication that you are not doing fair and open competition. Debarred contractors, go out and check sam.gov. Lack of required contract clauses. Those are in 24 CFR 570 and 2 CFR 200. Another list that I was asked to kind of run through and bring to your attention. Home buyer assistance programs. Number one is they're not the homeowner. That's going to be, I realize that there may be indications where there's title issues, things of that, but you should have policies and procedures that lay out a roadmap what to do in those cases. Same thing for not primary residents. Have good policies and follow them. Identity theft. And yes, I have seen identity theft happen in our programs. Everything from bad social security numbers to they just bid out and used somebody's house and they didn't even live there. Duplication of benefits. There's the conversation of we are only supposed to provide what they need, not more than what they need. So there is a calculation of unmet need that needs to be done. Home not damaged by the disaster. Check. Surely there's flood maps. Surely you can see where this home is located. Collusion with a contractor. I have seen this both on the homeowner side and I have seen it on the entity side. Both cases is collusion because they're going to get with that contractor of kickbacks or they're going to get for gratuities. But that is a common problem that can be either prevalent or unfortunately walk in your door and take its home in your program. Again, home is not repaired or properly repaired at all. Inspections, procedures, it's reviewed, the check goes through policy. Give you an example of an actual case. We had a grantee that because big disaster, they built a brand new computer system to do eligibility and intake. All custom built from the ground. We paid checks to people coded as N ineligible in the system. And not a little amount, $14 million worth of checks. A simple internal control could have fixed that of how much have we approved and how much have we paid? And if your amount of we're paying more than we approved pops up, somebody should have stopped, pulled the lever and said, whoa, something is not right here. They didn't find out about it till we got there. I felt bad for them. There could also be, you might have requirements that the person be in the house for a certain period of time, but that means you're going to have to monitor, check, and follow up. All right. Before I leave this topic, I want to discuss one other thing: fraud control cost-benefit considerations. We only require that you provide reasonable assurance, not total assurance, not absolute. So if you're protecting $500 worth of gold, I don't expect you to spend $10,000 to protect that $500 worth of gold. And, like Fort Knox is protected by armed guards and gates and security. We don't need to spend $4 billion because the aliens and cowboys and aliens may come down and suck the gold out of the vault. We don't have to do that. So bear that in mind when you're designing your controls. I want to stress this one for many reasons. Document, 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 document. It's vital for a lot of reasons. You need to be doing it in your risk assessment. You need to be documenting your policies and procedures. If they change, you need to document that. You actually need to support your financial management. That's part of 2 CFR 200. That's the Uniform Administrative Requirements. You have to be able to explain and support your procurement actions. And like I said in a previous slide, these are long grants. Please don't destroy the records because you're actually supposed to maintain documents until 3 years after the grant closes. And these are long-lived grants. Store your records. Also, reasonableness of cost and whether they're allowable. So there's a lot of reasons to have documents. Please, for me and for my criminal investigators who are not here today, look at including certifications and warnings, not only to your employees' time cards, grant applications, home buyers assistance programs. Put those in there because what are you doing? You're taking away the incentive. You're implementing a strong control. If somebody reads that you will be persecuted for lying, they may be a little less likely to sign that document. It doesn't mean we're going to stop it all, but maybe we'll cut out a few out of that herd. Preferred location, above the signature lines. All right. Can somebody tell me where I am on time? I didn't start my clock. Woo, I'm going to have to speed up. All right. 2 CFR 200. That is the definition of internal controls. Basically, you need them. Why? Because 2 CFR 200-303 says you have to have them. And not only do you have to have them, and again, that word reasonable assurance, it gives you a roadmap and says, hey, you should follow standards for internal control in the federal government and COSO's integrated framework. And I'll get to those in a minute. But not only that, you have to have internal controls because you need to make sure that you're applying with the statutes, the regulations, which is both 24 CFR 570, as well as the federal registers, and the terms of your grant agreement, which may be one or many. You're supposed to monitor and evaluate your results, not only of you, but if you have subrecipients, you are supposed to evaluate and monitor them too. If you find non-compliance, you are required via 2 CFR 200 to take prompt action. All right. And you have to protect PII, which is personally identifiable information. There is the standards for internal control for the federal government. The live link is on that page in the presentation. It is also called the Green Book. This was originally made for the federal government, but my gosh, it's such a wonderful thing. Hopefully you go back home and pull it up and use it because it talks about how important internal controls are to your organization. And it talks about, it has 5 principles and 17 steps. And the 5 principles revolve around the control environment, which is your culture, your tone, your ethics. It then talks about the risk assessment, which we just went through. It talks about control activities. What are you doing to make sure that these things that you are doing are done? And it talks about communicating, and it talks about monitoring to make sure that everything that you say you're doing actually gets done. They come up with a cube, and at first I really didn't understand it, but the more I dig into it, the more I understand. The top of that cube is your operations, your reporting, and your compliance. Those are your entity. Your entity is made up of the other side of the cube, the divisions. So it might be your management, it might be your individual units, your organization, but everything is tied in one way or another to those 5 components of internal control. They fit together. They are the gate that can keep your organization safe. COSO, I'm not going to go as deep into it because it really almost mirrors Green Book. Additional things that I would love for you to go look at and read: Program Integrity, the Anti-Fraud Playbook, GAO's a framework for managing fraud risks, COSO's Fraud Risk Management Guide. And I didn't live link it. If you really want a copy, my email is at the very end of this presentation. Email me. You have to be an ACFE to get to the Anti-Fraud Playbook, but it's a really good document. If you look at GAO's framework, though, it almost mirrors that really basic control environment I walked you through before. The only difference is they actually talk about assess, design, evaluate, commit. So they work commit as its own segment. COSO's Fraud Risk Management Guide looks very similar to the generic one that I pulled from AICPA. But this is something I would really recommend. It's in the slide. If you want it, let me know. ACFE's Anti-Fraud Playbook actually takes it a step back and even bigger. And it says you as an organization should look at your fraud process and see where you are. Are you ad hoc, which is level 1, which means you don't do anything really well. You're reactionary. If a fraud happens, you're behind the curve. And it walks you all the way up to level 5 of you are a high-performing agency. You not only plan for fraud, if fraud is detected, you're there and on it, you take action. I would hope most of you can get to 3 or 4. I'm going to just skip that one because it's going to be covered. All right, common fraud schemes that I have covered in my years. All of those. Embezzlement and theft tends to be very harmful to an organization. The longer embezzlement goes on, the more likely it is to damage your organization. I have found that people that have been there over 10 years, it's normally in the hundreds of thousands. Contracting and procurement fraud, it can also be costly, especially to your organization's reputation. Bribery and kickbacks, those are harder to detect. Conflicts of interest, that's going to be what they call corruption. Social media scams, though, that's typically something outside your organization, but I would say that when you get your disaster programs up off the ground, include on your web pages, we are the only one that you should be coming to get assistance if you want HUD assistance, and you don't need to pay somebody to get HUD assistance because trust me, when a disaster hits, there are people out there trying to make a buck. Identity theft is another part of social media or social scams. But contractor fraud is something that we run into a lot. It is a problem. And, I would say a lot of contractor fraud can be found if you have a diligent contracting organization. I have had contracting organizations come to me and say, we got this. It doesn't look like it's right. What do you think? Example, 3 bids. All the bids actually came in looking very similar format, very similar setup, very similar font. You want to know what the nail in the coffin was, though? That organization kept the envelopes. So tell me again why this organization in Florida is emailing in a bid from Texas. It was a ghost bidding scheme. It was one contractor that got the contract, setting up fake invoices and fake documents to get the contract. So be aware, look at your documents. I like to tell people professional skepticism, trust but verify. If you've got out-of-state organizations, why don't you check and see if they exist? Call them up and say, did you bid? False eligibility claims, You're going to have those. I'm glad to say that if there are good controls, they tend to be small in number. Okay. There is 97 point something billion in CDBG-DR going back to 9/11. 97 billion, that's a B. There are 79 active grantees, so there's a lot of money out there. Since 2002, we've done 156 audits. There are common issues. We actually did a report on it in 2022. Those are the big four. And I realize the first one may be a large lumping ground, but it really is one bucket when you look at it. You're not either following your program or you're not following HUD's programs. But procurement surprised me how many procurement issues we were finding. Eligibility, it's not more of these people aren't eligible, it's documentation. If your policies say to do it a certain way, please make sure you're doing it that way. And if you're not doing it that way because something happened, change your policies and train your people on the new ones. Monitoring though, monitor your program, but also monitor your sub-recipients. All right. Did not follow the local subrecipient agreements. That ties into monitoring. All right, why have I been hyping and yelling about internal controls? Top two reasons were either they didn't follow what was there or what was there was poor. And what's interesting is I didn't pull ACFC report till this year. That's the top two for ACFE. 53% of ACFE's fraud cases are those two reasons. Please monitor your subrecipients because ultimately you as the grantees, if you are the primary grantee with HUD, you're on the line. Have enough people, have enough staff, train them, bring on qualified people. If you want to know what we did, I have given you a live link to every disaster report that we've issued. Please feel free to go out there, browse, look. You can search by entity, you can search by topic. How am I on time? Questions for me? I think, yeah, my email's in the corner. If there's something I can give you that you want, please email me. I would also say in the middle is our hotline. As I said in the presentation, 43% of frauds are uncovered via tips. One other thing that I just crawled through my brain, 16% of frauds had no behavioral indicator. There is no pressure, none of that's showing. So how did the fraud get found? The rest of the controls. I think I saw a hand over there, or were you just stretching, ma'am? Stretch. So good controls do find fraud. And don't be afraid to call us. We're here. No questions?
Hello. Okay, it's been a long day. All right.
Yes.
So I'm just representing the table back there.
I won't call your name. I don't know who you are. You're safe to flee after this is over.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So we're just wondering if OIG considers the HUD grantees when you're doing an audit, if you consider them as internal or external auditees.
It's an interesting question because actually we've undergone a reorganization. We used to actually have offices across the country that did all programs. Now we are actually organized by program type. So like I said there, I am an assistant audit director for disaster recovery and audit. That means I'm responsible for auditing all the way from the Virgin Islands all the way to Samoa. So the concept of internal and external, we're doing a lot more audits now where we're looking at the program's impact, and how we can improve the outcomes both for the grantees and for HUD. So we may be doing work where you as a grantee are selected, but the audit notification letter will be addressed to HUD. But trust me, you will be notified. We will tell you before we walk in the door. We will have an entrance conference with you. But the notification letter that gets posted to our webpage, which again, all of our audits, when we open them, are posted to the HUD OIG webpage, which is right there, hudoig.gov. You can have an idea of what work we have open right now. Good question, by the way. Thank you. Did I answer it, by the way? Okay. Yes. Pretty much we consider internal, external passé now. I'd be kind of how I would describe it. We're more looking at the programs. Now, there may be an occasion where we go to just one grantee, but that's going to be, we will weigh significance, materiality, and the risks before we go to just one. Not a problem. Anybody else? It was a really good question.
If you have a question, you can raise your hand or go to one of the mics and I can bring a mic to you. Just raise your hand. Okay, yep.
This is a question from my comrade who's in another session.
Okay.
She wants to know how to detect fraud or waste when reviewing payment draws. Like what are some things she could be looking for?
Okay, when you say a payment draw, though, give me an idea. Is that going to be for a homeowner? Is that going to be for a contractor, or either or?
She's typically dealing with contractors.
All right, contractors. Number one, hopefully if it's a large payment, you actually have a contract division that goes through. So it's going to be things like, are what's in that part of the contract? You know, we tend to call that, does it meet the actual scope of work? Are there performance measures? You know, are we paying, if they're under a percentage of completion, are we only paying 10%? Are we making sure that we keep retainage? You know, there are things like that that you're looking for. Look at the invoices. I've seen in the past where if it looks sketchy, sometimes you can call the sub and say, did you do work on this? We're doing a quality check. There is nothing wrong with doing that. That's called doing your due diligence. Things along the lines of, does it add? Does it look blurred? You know, I realize we're in the age of electronics, but you can still blow stuff up and look at it on a PDF. Does it even make sense? You know, like I mentioned the one where it was from out of state. You know, does it, I like to call it, like I said, professional skepticism. Look, and does it make sense? You know, and also just look at the contract when you're creating, you know, I don't know who might create contracts. Have clear contracts. Make sure that your contracts have what I like to call measurables and deliverables. It's really hard to make sure that you're paying the right amounts if your contract is a 2-page document. We will pay for services. Thank you very much. We'll pay you up to $1 million. Wow, I can bill for anything. And there's nothing that you as the grantee can do to kind of stop that until you amend your contract. I would say more is for fraud. It's when you start getting a lot of stuff. If it's a main contractor, check occasionally and make sure that the subs are being paid. We have one, I can't say who or what or where, but literally their bond didn't exist and none of the subs had been paid. That's going to be a mess because the money is out the door. So does that kind of cover what they're looking for?
Yeah, I think I just have 2 follow-up questions
Sure.
regarding like our single family projects. We're having a hard time verifying household size. And we've seen some people trying to fudge the numbers. And so we have processes in place for them to kind of self-certify who's in their household. But what can we be, excuse me, looking to really like verify that household size? And then the other pieces, finding out about marriages that happen overseas. Yeah, so that's been a recent issue. Where can we go to look for that information?
Right.
I have no idea.
Well, and now you're getting into what I would call perhaps the dedicated fraudsters. The people that are really, their sole purpose is to commit fraud. So for family size, there are things that you can ask for. I realize this is a low income program. Have they applied for other types of aid where they might be able to have to disclose their family size? Maybe you could get it that way. Ask for tax returns because normally they have to list dependents. There are ways to kind of build a case of we need this information, but I would say you as an entity need to sit down with your fraud team when you're doing your fraud assessment and say, what steps do we want to do that cover us enough but doesn't take us too far? And I would say for those, definitely for that program, make sure you have very good, and I would say repetitive frauds and false statement certifications, because that's maybe one of the ways to get somebody to stop is have those false statements with the penalties spelt out. A fine up to $100,000. Sometimes that also can act as a deterrent. And you had, what was the follow-on question?
Finding out about over international marriages, which impacts household size.
Okay, matching household size. That's one I've not delved into. I would hope that there is a marriage certificate, perhaps that they would have to prove that this person is actually in the country, visas, things like that. Because again, I would expect households, and again, I'm getting a little far out of my range, but I would say also talk to HUD, ask them what they think would be best in that specific case.
Thank you.
No, not a problem at all.
Any other questions?
Did y'all have fun? Thank you for inviting me. Please feel free to email me. Enjoy your day tomorrow.